Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Let's start with the little reality check. Let's get it out of the way. I know there's a lot of whining and complaining and kicking and screaming and the victim card being played everywhere. Reality check. Donald Trump lost. It's over. There is no path to Donald Trump being president on January 21st. And there's just no path. We know that. We're seeing it. Those of us who live in the fact-based, reality-based world, we get it. And look, what we are witnessing the kind of behavior that every parent would smack their child over if they displayed this in public. When I was a kid, if I would have acted like this, my mother would have beat the living tar out of me. And I could only think that what we're seeing is the result of the participation award culture. This entitlement that, well, I can't lose. It's not even a matter of winning. It's I can't lose. So what you're seeing from these folks, and it's quite sad. It really is that reality doesn't come anywhere near the space between their ears. But this idea that they didn't think it was even remotely possible that Donald Trump, dear leader, could possibly lose. And the reality is all along for the last year, the polling has been against him. And what we're seeing, and look, here's the interesting part of this. What we're seeing is Donald Trump doing what Republicans have always done. They feel entitled to grabbing the chalice. They are entitled to, quote unquote, winning. And if they don't get their way, it's scorched earth. It's, burn the house down behind you. And it's what we're seeing. And sadly, the rest of us are in this moment of suffering. And we've got an administration coming in that's being denied basic access. For instance, the State Department evidently is preventing Joe Biden from getting messages from foreign leaders. And you go, the point of that would be, well, petulance, clearly. But just this belief that they can't lose. And that there's a path somewhere for them to win. Now, look, Georgia has announced that they are going to recount by hand every ballot in the state of Georgia. Now, the gap between Joe Biden and the person who has lost Georgia, Donald Trump, is 14,000 votes. Can you make up those 14,000 votes by challenging? Well, the legal teams, I think, believe they can. So they can disenfranchise more than 14,000 people who have legally cast their ballots. Now, I know, this is one of those moments where you go, but Rick, they weren't legally cast. These people illegally cast. There's all this stuff on the internet. I heard it on talk radio. There's fraud. There's all kinds of shenanigans and chicanery. There are all kinds of things going on. They're stealing it from us. And that makes for fun conspiracy theory. It makes for fun discussion. It makes for fun back and forth. But it doesn't make for fact. And in fact, we're seeing story after story where they've come out with a breaking headline. Man in Pennsylvania overhears postal officials who are going to backdate ballots, only to find out that no, the guy recanted. They basically talked him into it. Now the people who talked him into it are basically saying, no, they talked him out of it. So this poor schlub is in the middle of this being played like a ping pong ball because he's a true believer. and he's wrong. And for me, I like to sit back and watch this stuff play out because it's fun watching the whining and complaining and the kicking and screaming. And, it's like being, it's really like being on the cereal aisle on a Saturday morning when mom's taking the kids grocery shopping. Lots of kicking and screaming, lots of demands, lots of all of that stuff. I'm going to hold my breath. Lots of that. And this is what we're getting. Now, I tend to listen to the lawyers. One of the things that I love about lawyers is that they will lie to your face. They will lie. They will make stuff up. They will twist and contort reality. But the second they walk into that courtroom, the second they're standing in front of that person wearing the dress and the robe there, the second they're under oath, the second that the possibility of being shown at the Gray Bar Hotel because they have lied in court, the second that's a possibility, they snap to and they tell the truth. And that has happened here in Pennsylvania as the Trump lawyers have in pursuing a case in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, wanting to stop, I think it's 592 of these disputed ballots. The judge point blank asked this Jonathan Goldstein, who was a lawyer for Donald Trump, is there anything? Do you know of anything? Are you claiming that there's any fraud in connection with these 592 disputed ballots? Anything, any fraud? And immediately the next answer is all you need to know. Well, to my knowledge at the present, no. He said, are you claiming that there is undue or improper influence upon electors with respect to these 592 ballots? Well, to my knowledge, no. And then the judge presses him on fraud. Well, fraud's a big word. I'm not going to call anybody that. I'm not going to say any of that. Basically admitting there's no fraud here. There's nothing to see other than the slamming the fist on the table, the screaming, the insane tweets, the truck drivers who are going to turn the truck sideways because they believe, I don't know what the hell they believe. But when those people are in the courtroom, they snap too. It's kind of like if you remember going back to 2012, when here in Pennsylvania, our state legislature rammed through voter ID. And we had the Speaker of the House, say, voter ID, going to win the election for Mitt Romney here in Pennsylvania, done. Well, when they went to court, this is one of those things I love to remember because, again, I love when lawyers are under oath and in a courtroom because the guy or the woman or whomever's in the robe knows the BS they're about to spew and knows what legally is right and wrong. So they tend to play it straight. And before the voter ID lawsuit happened, they have a stipulation of fact. This is what both sides agreed to. And one of the things that they agreed to is that there had never been a case that they could find either in Pennsylvania or across the nation where the voter ID law would have stopped someone from fraudulently voting. Right there was all you needed to know about voter ID. And the fact that you have a lawyer right now saying there's nothing here is all you really need to know about what's going on. Now, there's going to be a lot of kicking and screaming. This is one of those moments where the facts are not with Donald Trump. Donald Trump lost. That's simple. But he is doing everything that you expect from them. Now, I remember in 2016 and in 2000, and this is the difference between Democrats and Republicans. Democrats tend to adhere to the rule of law, adhere to precedent, adhere to history. They are kind of more conservative than the quote-unquote conservatives because they don't believe in tearing things down. Al Gore conceded. He claimed he lost. He didn't say, I demand every vote be counted. I demand everything be examined. And maybe he should have. And maybe the lesson here is maybe this is the future. Maybe the era of I can't lose is our future. And you have to ask yourself, is this the one we want? Is this how we want things to play out, where every election, now you're going to start making stuff up? Now every one little incident, someone made a mistake, is now we're going to blow into, well, in this case, 5 million votes. Because regardless, Donald Trump lost by 5 million votes, and 3 million votes the last time he lost by, which does explain why when Trump took office, his supporters were still angry. They won. They were the poor winners. And now they've shown us just how poor of losers they are. And I've taken some heat going, look, I think you have to reach to these people, because if this is what every election is going to be like, if this is going to be the path forward, we're never going to have a government with the consent of the governed. We're never going to have a country that's anywhere near united. And that's a bad thing, especially as we head into where we're going next. The sad reality is the COVID pandemic is not going away. It's not. Sorry. I know everyone was saying, once election's over, once Joe Biden's president, well, Joe Biden's president-elect, it's all just going to go away. And yet we see, again, more record after record days of infections. And now we're record hospitalizations. A record number of people are in hospitals right now because of the virus. And from people that I've talked to, it doesn't look like it's going the other way anytime soon. And while Donald Trump and his administration are doing everything they can do to, throw their temper tantrum and block Joe Biden, President-elect Joe Biden, from all of the levers of transitioning, and also the reality of being there could possibly not be a peaceful transfer of power, the first time in the history of this nation. Think about the magnitude of that. But that doesn't matter to the poor sports and the losers. They are going to kick and scream, and for them, I say we have to let them go. It's the rational and the sane, because we've got a lot of work to do. We got to get things done. And number one among them is getting this virus under control. Now, the CDC is now coming out and saying, well, now if you wear masks, now it could protect the person wearing them. And this is one of those things where the mixed messages that we're getting from this administration and the CDC trying to pander to Trump is frighteningly dangerous. Now, I said months ago, you wear the mask, obviously you keep some of the stuff from going out, not going to spread it, good thing. But also probably not going to get everything through either, might add some protection. Seems like common sense. We used to have it. I wonder where it went. There's part of me that thinks it's sitting on the shelf with the participation trophy, but I'm not quite sure. But we're in this moment, and I keep coming back to this moment where we better figure out how to talk to each other in a sane, rational way, and in a way that with the goal of actually getting things done instead of winning. I've had so many conversations with people lately where I just tell them, look, I'm not in this to win. There's no winning for us. The winning is getting something accomplished. The winning is when we move forward. The winning is when we get better schools. The winning is when we get better infrastructure. The winning is when we get safer neighborhoods. The winning is when we get better jobs. The winning is all of those things. That's when the winning is. The winning isn't some petty argument that the two of us are going to have where, I scored a point on you. That's not winning. That's being a child in a schoolyard. I've been there. I've done that. It's over. I now have concerns about my kids' future. I have concerns about the potential grandchildren down the road if they're going to have a future. And for me, this is a defining moment. I was not a Joe Biden fan from the beginning. I'm not. I don't know that he's going to pursue bold enough ideas, but I know the insanity is going to stop. And I look at what Donald Trump is doing right now. all these frivolous lawsuits, all of the insane tweets, all the conspiracy theory that he's promoting, all the disinformation, all of this scattershot kind of, we'll throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks. And I can't help but think that the end of his presidency is indicative of exactly how he led this country for 4 years and how he has led us astray and how he has divided and demeaned and pitted us against one another and destroyed what was a very powerful economy. There are still people today struggling. And yet, we still don't have a stimulus bill. Because we're still mired in, well, I'm gonna turn my truck off and I'm not gonna deliver anything, or I'm gonna protest an election that Trump clearly lost. Instead of saying, okay, Biden's the guy. How do we move him one way or the other? If you're not in favor of socialism, you don't want health care, fight for that. But let's move this to a policy fight and not a cult of personality fight. Let's move this into how we're going to make people's lives better with our ideas. Because to be honest with you, I have yet to hear conservatives come out with an idea. I've yet to hear them come out with how we're going to move us forward into the 21st century to compete with China and the rest of the world. I've yet to hear them come out with a cogent argument on how we're going to make sure that everyone gets the health care that they need, that pre-existing conditions are going to be covered, and how they're going to be covered. I've yet to hear any rational thought on how we're going to fix our educational system, how we're going to fix the problems that we have in our inner cities. I hear nothing from conservatives other than no. Other than we've been robbed. Other than they cheated, when there's none of that. And like I said, it's one thing when you can go on Twitter and you can yell and scream and tweet out in capital letters. It's a whole nother thing when you have to walk into that courtroom and look a judge in the eye who knows your lingo and come up with something factual. And not something that you threw out while standing in front of a landscaping business with somebody who's a sex offender. None of that. But an actual plan. And then, here's the really important part. We can talk about the plan. And I may even agree with you. If you got any thoughts, I want to hear it. Rick at thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, the ACA was up on the Supreme Court block. We're going to find out more about what happened. Quick break. Right back.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win.
On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 2009. That was the day more than 5,000 Philadelphia transit workers walked off the job. For 6 days, buses, subways, and trolleys that carried close to 500,000 commuters a day came to a screeching halt. The strike defied then-Governor Ed Rendell's orders for both sides to stay at the bargaining table. The union planned to strike during the World Series, but pushed back the strike date under threat of serious consequences made by the governor. For months, the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, or SEPTA, stalled contract talks. The authority hoped to rip up workers' abilities to choose work assignments based on seniority rights. They also looked to eliminate jobs through speed up. The union was determined to hang tough despite a steady barrage of anti-union commentary in the media. Local editorials smeared workers as ingrates and whined that they weren't sufficiently thankful to simply have a job in such hard economic times. More cynical writers contended that sticking points on healthcare were resolved when SEPTA agreed to cover the cost of Viagra. Authorities, including Philadelphia Mayor Michael Nutter, claimed the union was being unreasonable in the face of such generous terms offered by transit management. But TWU Local 234 successfully defeated the boss's offense to wrestle away benefits and work rule concessions. The union demanded wage increases and limits to employee health care contributions. Irate union members insisted on independent audits to reveal where years of pension money went. They accused SEPTA of raiding the already underfinanced pension fund. The union eventually conceded on pension contributions, but the strike was a victory. TWU members showed that even in difficult times, a successful fight could be waged against cutbacks and hard-won rights.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So this week you had the Supreme Court hearing the ACA case, and I got to tell you, up until the day, I had this view that this court was just going to, in a huge way, side with corporate America, side with the tax breaks that the wealthy would get from this. So I was actually fairly shocked to see some of the news that came out of the questioning and some of the lines of questions, and it kind of looks like they're trying to find a way out of ruling on it at all by saying, look, the government doesn't have standing, which I think would be, well, pretty incredible. And here to share some thoughts on, well, what happened at the hearing and what it would look like if we actually did take health care away from millions of people. I've asked Peter Morley to come talk with us. Peter's a patient advocate and the Founders Council of U.S. of Care. Peter, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick. I'm through the magic of Zoom. I'm coming to you live. Got to be careful with that. Live from the Supreme Court. Let's do my man on the street reporting. I just want to say, people don't understand. People look, when people hear the ACA, they immediately think of the marketplace. They think of, and it did help millions of uninsured Americans gain access for the first time. But I just want to read you these points that if the Supreme Court does strike down the ACA, I think it's important to note. Here are the things, some of the main points that would happen. The protections of 135 million Americans with pre-existing conditions, gone. The uninsured rate would increase by 65%. Medicaid expansion, which covers more than 15 million people, gone. 12 million seniors will have to pay more for their prescription drugs because the Medicare donut hole will be reopened. 2.3 million adult children will no longer be able to stay on their parents' insurance. Insurance companies will be able to charge women 50% more than men. And here, lifetime caps on care would return. And I'll tell you, from somebody who's had kidney cancer surgery, a lifetime cap can be gone in a surgery or a hospital stay. Yep. So these are some of the things that we're talking about. And you're looking at someone who has over 10 pre-existing conditions, who has had 10 surgeries in 13 years. And I have tried to put a human face to this law because people hear ACA or they hear Obamacare. First of all, sometimes a lot of people still don't know the difference, but it's the same thing for those who don't know the difference at this point. But that's what could not be repealed through Congress. So a group of GOP attorneys general set out in February 2018 to strike down the ACA, and they got support for the first time in history by the DOJ. They were told by the Trump administration, instructed the DOJ to look the other way for the law of the land. And here we are yesterday in Supreme Court, where you have a shocking surprise support from Justice Kavanaugh. Now, he was somebody I never expected. Now, of course, I say this with the most cautiously optimistic, however grammatically correct you want to say this, cautiously optimistic way of saying this court case is not going to be decided until they're saying possibly next summer, as early as April. And meanwhile, people are in incredible deal of stress because this has been going on for 4 years.
Yeah, I assume this case, along with some of the other ones that are hot button cases, are going to be right to the end in June, like they normally do, so they can get out of Dodge. Because this is going to be one of those moments. There's such fervor on both sides. The people on one side, you have people who I've spoken to who give credit to this law for saving their lives and giving them
Yes.
access to the care that they need. And on the other side, you have people who, have been trained like Pavlovian dogs to just, whenever they hear Obamacare or the ACA, to just foam at the mouth without, as you pointed out, knowing anything really about it. Because they lost, and we're in this weird world where, we have people who don't know how to lose.
That's sad reality. But as I've told you in the past, it's been my advocacy, my 32 trips to DC, and all the advocacy I've done remotely since March, since I haven't been able to travel because of COVID. I've spoken to offices I never thought that I would ever speak to about these issues, because constituents who are affected by the ACA live in every single state, in every single district. And it's important that their members of Congress hear their stories, because they matter.
Right.
Their lives matter, and their stories need to be heard. And a lot of times they don't, I know this is hard to believe, but I was actually a very, very private person about my healthcare before 2016. But when I felt a need to speak out, when, Trump became president, first day in office, first thing he did was sabotage the ACA by taking away advertising dollars for open enrollment. And it was projected that 500,000 people didn't sign up in January of 2017 because of that.
Yeah.
So,
And all along, they've done everything they can do to restrain and to destroy the law by passing a law that took away the penalty, which they claim was the basis, because this lawsuit is based on,
Yes.
since they zeroed out the penalty, there's no tax to fund it. Other than the taxes from devices and unwealthy folks and stuff that are already in there. But the penalty tax isn't there. So the theory, I guess, is since they zeroed that out, the whole law should be chucked out because, well, the personal responsibility part of paying your tax into this to fund it isn't there, which, again, I think Congress can undo with passing a law. And I think the Supreme Court's position is right. If you can't deal with it in Congress, don't come to us and expect us to
Right.
figure it out.
Well, Congress can undo it if we have a Senate that will be willing to first of all bring it to the floor, and second of all vote on it in favor to strengthen it, or excuse me, just to undo what's been done. But here's the thing: we had 4 years where they could have taken the ACA, they could have made it stronger, they could have enhanced it. I won't look back in retrospect because we can't undo what's been done.
Right. But Peter, we haven't had just 4 years. We've had 10 years.
That's true.
We've had a bunch of years that Republicans have stonewalled and have blocked and obstructed and done everything they can possibly do. They ran on repeal and replace without a replacement plan in place. So had they done their repeal part, we would have nothing right now. Because they have nothing.
Well, we would have Trump care, which is junk care.
No, what we would have
that's
is we'd have pay or die. We would go
Yes.
back to the good old days where, sorry, Peter, you've got some pre-existing conditions. You're uninsurable. There's no way you can't afford insurance. You're out of luck. Better luck next time.
And let me tell you something. My biologic injections cost $120,000 a year. So I'm sorry to say this, Rick, but lupus is a very difficult illness to manage, and I may not be here, and I don't know what my future is regardless, but as long as I'm here, I know I'll keep fighting, because I've heard from so many people around the country. You know, I've represented thousands of people in Congress. I've testified on their behalf. I brought their stories. I've had them entered into the congressional record, because it is so important to know what, you know, how the ACA has helped them. And I would say, I mean, I'm not, this isn't a actual study, but just based on my experience, it's helped more than it's hurt. And I think it's definitely time for the country to unite and to work together and to come up with a plan. If the Supreme Court yesterday was any indication, it seems that they want to send a strong message to Congress. You need to figure this out. And look, we are still in the middle of COVID-19. We've seen record cases around the country. I mean, healthcare should be the priority. Healthcare should be. It shouldn't even be an issue. I shouldn't even be having these conversations with you.
No, you're right.
But it is, and it's to me, it's despicable. But to other people, it's life or death.
And here's the thing, the thing that I find interesting, and as you pointed out, for a lot of people, and I've met some folks who, you know, some of the people that you've told stories of, and some of the folks that I've met, you know, just in life, who, you know, this has saved their life, and this is the matter of life and death for them. And, you know, it's not great. It's not perfect. There are things we should be doing, and we should be doing immediately. And I don't know that we get to that point unless people, you know, put down their hatred of the black guy who used to be in the White House and start going, you know, this is going to be good for all of us. And I'll give you an example. You know, I'm helping folks out who are on strike. Whatever the issues are there's a strike going on. These people are about to lose their health insurance, and you know they're panicking on what do they do to replace the health insurance, because they've got sick kids, they've got sick spouses, they've got all of these things. And my mind immediately goes back to what I've always said. Your health insurance should have nothing to do with your employer. It should have nothing to do with who you work for or where you work. It should have everything to do with your right of being a citizen. And until we get to that point, I don't know that we fix any of our problems.
You know, it's I've often described this in Congress as healthcare being and I always have to describe this because, you know, there's different roads in different states. But if you imagine a small highway and exit 5 is the ACA and exit 1 is universal healthcare, we have to figure out what exit 4, exit 3, and exit 2 are so we can get to exit 1, because healthcare is a human right. And, you know, I think it's sad that we have to convince people in this country that is the case. But, you know, when you're sick and you need it, that's when it becomes crucial.
No, absolutely. And this is one of the conversations that I've had with people. They're now concerned and looking, you know, hey, what's out there?
Right.
And, you know, as I've been saying, I'm not tied. I'm not married to anything.
Right.
I want something that's going to work. I'm an advocate for Medicare for all, but if someone's got a better plan, if we make the ACA affordable for people, and it's not the kind of insurance that, you know, some of the stories I've heard with, you know, fairly high deductibles and all of that stuff, I'm all for it. I want to get stuff done more than I want to be ideologically pure.
I mean, I'm with you. Accessible, affordable, quality healthcare for every American. And, you know, unless we're all moving towards that direction, I agree with you. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen, but we just have to keep trying. We just have to keep trying. And if you look at Florida, it's a very good example of a state that relies on Medicare, Medicaid, the ACA, like very, very heavily. And to see how the vote went, you have citizens there who voted against their own health care. And I think that's what's really important, is that we really, really need to educate people. We need to do a better job of educating people on the ground in local states, in local cities. We need to educate people because some people do realize that they're voting against their own health care and they don't care. But I really believe there are a lot of people who don't. And here's a great example of it. When CHIP, the Children's Health Insurance Plan, was being reauthorized, there were a lot of parents who didn't even realize that their children, because this CHIP is called something else in different states, they didn't realize that their child was on CHIP. So that, you know, when their child's healthcare was running out of funding, they were panicking and they didn't realize how much they depended on that plan. So we need to educate people, because like I said from the beginning, the ACA is not just a marketplace. The Medicaid expansion, over 15 million people were allowed access to healthcare because they fit into that Medicare, Medicaid gap.
Right.
And, you know, not every state accepted it either. There's still, I believe, 10 or 11 states that still don't have Medicaid expansion. And those, I'm not going to use that, I'm not going to drop an F-bomb, but, you know, they're screwed.
Right.
But that's what we need to do. We need to educate people. We need to inform people. We need to do a better job of that. We need to really reach out to people. I truly believe it. I commend Joe Biden on his victory speech and saying he's going to govern every American, whether they voted for him or not. I think that's the first step.
Right. So last question I've got for you, on January 20th, when Biden becomes not president-elect, but president, is there one thing that he can do right away that's going to make things better?
Yes, he can repeal the GOP 2017 tax scam. Yes. And maybe by repealing the individual mandate, maybe that shakes up the SCOTUS case. Who knows? I'm not a legal expert, but I heard that might be possibly something that he might be doing.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's something, at some point, somebody's got to do something, because we can't keep running to the Supreme Court and holding families hostage as we've been doing these last couple of years. Because I know people who have been on the ACA for several years now here, because Pennsylvania was one of the states that did it, a while ago. And, they're always anxious. Is this going to be the year they take it from me? Is this the year that I'm going to go uninsured? Is this the year that I'm no longer insurable? These are very real concerns and very scary concerns. But Peter, I appreciate you taking some time and sharing your thoughts and the work that you do. You're one of my heroes, and you keep up the fight.
Well, thank you. And listen, you want to speak about Pennsylvania. Thank you for voting in Senator Casey, because he is one of the most compassionate, thoughtful leaders on healthcare. So thank you so much. It's such an honor and pleasure to work with him. Thank you. And thank you, Rick, for everything you do. Thank you for having me on. And as somebody who suffers from over 10 pre-existing conditions, this affects me. So thank you for everyone for supporting the ACA.
Good stuff, Peter. I appreciate the time. Our good friend Peter Morley. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Is this the right direction? Do you think the Supreme Court's going to leave it intact? You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1887. That was the day that 4 men were hung in Chicago for their alleged role in the bombing at a labor rally at the city's Haymarket Square a year earlier. 8 men were put on trial. Although the prosecution did not prove any of the men had ties to the bombing, 5 were sentenced to die. Louis Ling died in jail before the execution could take place. The others were martyred for their support of the labor movement and the fight for the 8-hour day. 3 of those executed were born in Germany. August Spies and Adolf Fischer worked for a Chicago German language workers' newspaper. George Engel owned a toy store. Backlash against foreign-born anarchists helped stoke public hysteria over Haymarket. The final martyr was Southern-born Albert Parsons, the editor of The Alarm, an English-language workers' paper. The day after they died, the Chicago Tribune reported on the brutality of their execution, writing, quote, "Then begins a scene of horror that freezes the blood. The loosely adjusted nooses remain behind the left ear and do not slip to the back of the neck. Not a single neck is broken, and the horrors of a death by strangulation begin." Thousands of mourners joined the funeral procession of the 5 slain men. In 1893, Governor John Peter Altgeld granted the 3 defendants still in jail a full pardon. The monument to the Haymarket 8 stands at Forest Home Cemetery, just west of Chicago, drawing visitors from across the world to remember these martyrs for the 8-hour movement. May Day is celebrated as the workers' holiday around the world in commemoration of the events in Chicago. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Well, here we go again. This time it's not Christmas. This time it's Thanksgiving. There's a war on Thanksgiving. Which, at some point we got to stop with this nonsense. And as I've been saying, I just want to get stuff done. I don't want to get mired down in these, somebody's taking our Thanksgiving. Joe Biden's taking Thanksgiving. Well, Joe Biden is president-elect. Thanksgiving is in a couple of weeks. He's not going to be president for a couple of months. Please stop. Stop with the nonsense. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, where we are, where we're going, and maybe what happens. I've asked former Illinois Congressman and former Republican presidential candidate Joe Walsh to come talk with us. Joe, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, I always like to talk to you. How are you, man?
I am good. I got to start with busting your shoes a little bit. You've been telling me for months now, it's going to be over Tuesday night, election night. We're going to know. They're going to call it early. This is the absolute opposite of that.
Well, Rick, I was thinking about that this morning, and I think I tweeted out the following. Imagine if they had counted the mail-in votes first.
Right.
We would have been there election night. This is where we would have been election night. But your Republican legislators in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and a number of other states, they decided, per Trump's orders, to count these mail-in votes last, hence dragging this thing out.
Yep.
So I was a little off. I apologize.
No, but it was one of those things where, on Tuesday night I'm watching the numbers and I'm going, Joe, where is it, man? Because at one point Trump was up 600,000 votes here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
As you said, when they and as I had predicted weeks earlier, once they start counting, it'll come back into fold, and it'll be somewhere between 50 and 100,000 votes, and that's where it is, right around 50,000 votes. Biden won by.
Well, and Rick, I got to be honest. I knew turnout would be through the roof, right? We knew that. I did not see Trump doing as good a job as he did getting his people out, and he did. I knew turnout in opposition to Trump would be, again, sky-high historic. But to his credit, he got his vote out too. That surprised me.
No, it didn't surprise me because I understand that the idea that someone's stealing from you is something that gets people motivated. High ideals. Hey, we're going to make things better. Hey, we're gonna change the world for our kids, and it's going to be a great future. That doesn't motivate anyone as much as they're stealing from you, and MS-13 is going to live next door.
Yeah. No, you're right. And clearly, Rick, it exposed, and I mean, the divide in this country. You and I have talked about it. The Democrats own the cities. The Republicans under Trump clearly own rural America. But under Trump, the Democrats now own the suburbs. It's pretty convincing.
Right. So here's my thing, and this is what I've been talking about since the election. Since election night is, how do we now, because this is much closer than most people thought it was going to be. I think everyone thought it'd be close. This was a lot closer than I was comfortable with.
My lovable progressive union friend, can I push back a little bit?
Hit me.
At the end of the day, I don't think this is a close election. I mean, electorally, Biden is going to end up at 306. He snagged back the blue wall. He grabbed Arizona and Georgia, and he'll end up winning the popular vote by 7 to 8 million votes. If we had known all of this election night, if the mail-in votes had been counted, you and I the next day would be talking about a pretty decisive victory.
Point well taken. Point well taken. But ultimately, we still see the whining and the complaining and all the stuff that's going on right now. And my question was moving past that, because we still are a divided country. He still did get well more than 70 million votes. That means that next election cycle, who knows where this goes? So the question I have is, how do we start bringing some people back to the center of the road where we can get things done? Because right now, if Democrats don't take both seats in Georgia, nothing's going to get done the next 4 years.
Yeah, I think we've got dark days ahead of us. I've been pretty public, Rick. I think the Republican Party is screwed. I think Trump now dominates the Republican Party. I'll go double or nothing on my bet about election night. I think Trump comes out within a year and says he's running for the nomination again in 2024. Donald Trump will dominate the Republican Party for the next 4 years, so they're screwed. But I think Biden has a great opportunity here. If he governs kind of from the middle, I think he can grab a lot of Republicans and independents permanently over to the Democratic side and have a strong majority party by 2024.
Yeah, I'm hoping that's the case. But, we're also seeing and look, the news media giveth, the news media taketh away. Nothing the media loves than build something up only to tear it right down. We're now seeing some infighting where the Democrats have been fairly famous about circular firing squads. Do you see some of that playing out?
Yeah, it might. I mean, I think about when I went to Congress in 2010, talk about a circular fighting squad. I mean, we Tea Party folks were going at it with the Republican establishment every day of the week. But if the Republicans keep control of the Senate, and it's going to be a tough lift for the Democrats to win those 2 Georgia seats, then in many ways, Rick, that does Biden a favor. He can look at his progressive base and say, look, I've got to work with Mitch McConnell. The country wants us to get a few things done. I think it'll force Biden to work from the middle, which might quiet folks on the left.
Yeah. Any lessons that obviously you came in as the Tea Party far right, working with the leadership. Any advice? Any ideas, thoughts on how the left should work with, because Nancy Pelosi's kind of gotten a pass in all this. Any thoughts on how that works itself out?
I don't know that they want my advice. If I'm advising the left and the progressives, Rick, I'm telling them to just grab their muskets and respectfully wage war against the middle of their party. The energy in the Democratic Party is on the progressive end. It's with the left. Pelosi has been hurt. Her majority has shrunk. I think the progressives do have more say in the House, and I think they ought to use it.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because we knew Joe Biden was going to move to the center, because that's who Joe Biden is, no matter what the right was claiming all during the election as the most liberal guy ever. And in fact, today I had a good chuckle at someone called, Chuck Schumer an uber liberal, and I'm going, I'm not quite sure. I think it was Kelly Loeffler in her ad called him some super liberal, and I'm going, well, I guess in comparison to you, Attila the Hun, maybe that's true.
No, look, the best thing the Democrats and Biden will have going for them, Rick, is is the Republican Party.
Yeah.
I can't tell you enough. Trump's not going away. This election was stolen from him. That's all he's going to say. And he's going to make life miserable for that party for 4 years, giving the Democrats, I believe, an opportunity to look reasonable and responsible again.
How much of the Republican Party do you think buys into this line that the election was fraudulent and that they were cheated? And how many do you have a sense of where the Republican Party is on that? Because I haven't heard
about the voters or elected officials.
Well, first the voters and then the elected officials, because I've only heard Susan Collins really come out and say anything, which it is what it is. But curious, because I'm worried about what I see coming. That lunchrooms are torn apart, that workplaces are a tatters, that my union's a tatter, and how do you bring that back together after this is over? Because ultimately, and I've been saying this for a while, I don't care who you voted for last election. We got stuff to get done. We'll pick it up on the next election, but we got stuff to get done.
Well, and again, Rick, you should be worried. I think we've got dark days ahead of us. Look, I come from the Trump world. His supporters used to be my supporters until I turned on Trump. I hear from, and I'm not exaggerating, thousands of them every day who are convinced that the election was stolen, that it was rigged. Rick, his supporters have bought all of this.
Yeah.
Now, Republicans in Congress, my former colleagues, they know it's all a joke. They know this is all performance art. I had a conversation with a Republican member of Congress just yesterday who said this is a complete joke. I'm sick of it. He's having a temper tantrum, and we have to let him have a temper tantrum. They know there's nothing there. They just are scared to death of alienating, again, his voters who have bought Trump's lie.
Yeah, but here's the thing: if let's just say it was stolen, just for argument's sake, and Democrats had the ability to steal elections, which they don't. They really did a poor job because they lost seats in the House, and they're not going to get the Senate. So what was the point of winning the presidency if you don't have the power to get anything done? And that's my problem with it. If there was a mad sweep where it went, Democrats had 52 seats in the Senate and, picked up more seats in the House, and then you go, okay, maybe, possibly, but come on, you don't lose all that other stuff and then claim you cheated.
No, and Rick, that's what has made me sad about the election. I'm glad Biden won, and I think Biden won a pretty big victory. But Trumpism, look, I think Trump won as well, because Trump gets to leave the White House with his lie intact that it was stolen. Trumpism now will dominate the Republican Party. If, as you said, Trump had lost by even more and the Democrats got back the Senate and picked up 10 seats in the House, and it was a total repudiation, then I think the Republican Party could have tried to begin to separate itself from Trump more, but now they're stuck with him.
Yeah, they're stuck with him. Now, from Biden's point of view, what do you see as the first line of policy, of legislation? He's going to get a very short honeymoon, I think, if anything at all. Where do you see the policy line going? Because he's got a lot to do, a lot of cleaning up with the virus, a lot of cleaning up with the economy. He's got a lot of stuff to do.
I think a bipartisan virus package. I think he moves on a bipartisan infrastructure package, and I think he does something with clean energy. Again, bipartisan. I think in those three areas, Rick, if I'm him, that's a great way to grab the middle and grab independents and Republicans who want nothing to do with Trump. I think in those three areas, he can put together bipartisan packages. And again, Rick, assuming Mitch McConnell is still the majority leader, which I think will be the case, McConnell can't stand Trump. He doesn't want Trump to be around. He doesn't want Trump to run in 2024. I wouldn't be surprised if McConnell quietly helped Joe Biden achieve some bipartisan legislative accomplishments.
Well, that's the hope. I mean, because ultimately my fear is we're 4 years down the road, like the last four and the four before that, where we don't get an infrastructure plan. Look, I've been talking about infrastructure 15 years doing this program. There's still bridges in Pennsylvania that are on you might not want to go over that list. In 2012, the legislature here passed the year of the Bible. And I go, yeah, the great thing is now we're all praying. We're praying we get from one side of the bridge to the other without it collapsing under us. And we've done very little to fix that. And I said when Trump took office, this is where you go. So I'm hoping Biden takes your advice and goes that way.
And you're right, Rick. We laughed for 3 years waiting on, this is infrastructure week for Trump. It's actually a great issue that even me, a Tea Party conservative, believes in. Rebuilding our infrastructure. That's a role for government. I hope Biden goes down that road.
Yeah. Last line of questioning I got for you. The Supreme Court now front and center. I'm sure you've got to be thrilled with who we've got on the court because a decidedly conservative court. But it looks like possibly, maybe not going to crush the ACA.
No, and I don't think they will. Based on that hearing yesterday, I think that Roberts and Kavanaugh are going to join the liberal justices and put it back on where it belongs, which is in the lap of the legislators. Look, Rick, I know I like Judge Amy Coney Barrett. I did not approve of the way she was approved and put on the court. And even though it's a 6-3 conservative majority now, they'll surprise people. Some of these justices can be much more independent than people realize.
No, I agree with that, but my concern is always this is a very corporate court more than it is anything else.
True. On that, you're right.
And the pendulum for me is swinging too far to the corporate side, moving us back to the bad old days of Lochner, which I see coming back in full swing. I'm concerned about that, and I'm concerned about the future of work in this country. As the NLRB has made decisions that I think are just horrible, and that the courts have upheld. I don't have good vibes for the future of work in this country either.
And it'll be interesting, Rick, to see if Biden has an opportunity to make a pick. Clarence Thomas is tired and wants off the court. I maybe now he'll wait 4 years, but Biden may have an opportunity to put someone on the court.
Yeah, we'll see how this plays out. Last question I've got for you. Tomorrow, there's still this chaos in the country. What are you telling people on how we can maybe come back to somewhere near the middle of the road? Because you and I, we've had these conversations for a long time. We disagree fundamentally on a lot of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's still respectful. It's still, we may disagree, but I don't wish you unwell, and I hope you don't wish me unwell. Thoughts?
Well, as you and I have talked for about 1.5 years now, Rick, the first step toward getting back to that place where Joe Walsh and Rick Smith can sit down and respectfully talk about issues was to get rid of Trump. And as difficult as this has been, and as an emotional roller coaster as this has been, Donald Trump lost. He's lost. That's a big deal. Follow the lead of Joe Biden. I love the way he's handling himself right now. Calm, cool, no drama. He's just moving ahead. Just picked his chief of staff. I mean, he's doing what he needs to do. Follow Biden's lead. Ignore Trump. And I think when this is all done and Joe Biden raises his right hand and becomes the president, I think you'll start to see folks like you and I coming together trying to solve some problems.
Good stuff. Joe, I appreciate the time. Always good talking to you, my friend.
Thanks, Rick.
Anytime. Our good friend Joe Walsh, former Illinois congressman. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year
1887. That was a tragic day for the labor movement. 4 men were hung in Chicago for their alleged role in the bombing at a labor rally at the city's Haymarket Square a year earlier. In a sensational trial, a total of 8 men were convicted for Haymarket. Although the trial had not proven any of the men had any ties to the bombing, 5 were sentenced to die. 1 died in jail before the execution could take place. The others were martyred for their support of the labor movement and the fight for the 8-hour workday. 2 of the men were German-born August Spies and Adolf Fischer, who had worked at Arbeiter Zeitung, a Chicago German-language pro-worker newspaper. A third was Albert Parsons, a Southern-born anarchist and the editor of the working people's English-language newspaper, The Alarm. The fourth was George Engel, a German-born labor activist and owner of a toy store. Neither Parsons nor Engel were even present at Haymarket during the time of the bombing. Before he was executed, Albert Parsons declared, "Let the voice of the people be heard." August Spies shouted, "The day will come when our silence will be more powerful than the voices you strangle today." In 1893, a Haymarket Martyrs Monument was commemorated at the Forest Home Cemetery just outside of Chicago. Carved at the base is August Spies' declaration. That same year, the governor of Illinois pardoned the remaining 3 Haymarket prisoners. 7 of the 8 men who were convicted of the Haymarket affair are buried at the cemetery, along with many other progressive activists who wanted to be interned alongside the martyrs. Each year, visitors from around the world visit the cemetery to pay their respects to these heroic men. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
A jittery week at the polls, huh? One measure of our political anxiety is that liquor sales spiked election week. Also, it's probably not a coincidence that a new breakthrough in drug legalization was made on Election Day when 56% of Oregon voters said yes to sanctioning the use of magic mushrooms, which are said to relieve anxiety and depression. Political pundits have rushed out to say, even to gloat, that Tuesday was a debacle for Democrats, especially for the progressive movement, and we certainly did not match our extraordinarily high expectations. But hold the mushrooms! Despite a queasy roller coaster ride in the Dump Trump race and disappointing shortfalls in some other contests, 2020 is hardly a debacle. Take heart from the phenomenal victories scored this year by our grassroots progressive movement, from picking up a dozen congressional seats to winning hundreds of local offices. This is movement building at its best and purest. Not only are we electing a broad and expanding network of officials, but also these runs increase the number, skills, and collective experience of our grassroots volunteers. They spread and refine our progressive populist message, and they teach us how to run better next time, if we're willing to learn. My message is an old and proven one. Persevere, keep pushing, build on what you learn, reach out. A movement is not a weekend project. Ask those who launched the women's suffrage movement, none of whom lived to vote, but they kept advancing. Or ask any of the various communities of outsiders who fought and are still fighting for civil rights and human dignity. These are the fights worth being part of. Winning doesn't come on one election day, but over a lifetime of participation. This is Jim Hightower saying, remember this bit of wisdom imparted to me years ago by a West Texas farmer. Battling the bastards is about as much fun as you can have with your clothes on.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, according to the U.S. Department of Justice, this charter chain, Concept Schools Incorporated, they've agreed to pay $4.5 million to end what they call a long-running federal corruption investigation. Now, this is a massive charter chain it's based in Chicago, has charter schools in Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. And again, you see these things happen all over the place, where these big money groups figure out how to, profit off of our kids not getting what they need. But it just doesn't stop there. Bad management, bad leadership has put us in this really bizarre place of, well, school isn't what it used to be. And they did nothing over the summer to really prepare for what was coming. And I lay that at the feet of someone like billionaire Betsy DeVos. But here to share some thoughts and tell me where I may be right and where I may be wrong, I've asked Jeff Bryant to come talk with us. Jeff is the chief correspondent for the Independent Media Institute. He's got a new piece over at The Progressive. Bad leadership is plunging public schools into a crisis. Jeff, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick, and thank you for having me back on the show again. Always a pleasure.
Anytime, love having you on. But, I'm looking at this, and I was saying over the summertime, this is the time that you work out all the bugs. This is the time you do the heavy work of getting us prepared for what everyone knew was coming, and that is this moment that we're living through. And it looks like our schools have failed us.
Well, the idea that the schools have failed us is actually sort of in itself a propaganda campaign, because what's happened is that the leadership who should be funding our schools, organizing schools to deal with the current crisis, those are the people who've really failed us. And so right now what you see are a lot of parents being very upset at school districts and teachers, thinking, well, why can't we send our children back to school? Why isn't the school prepared to deal with this issue? And so they're prone to victimizing the teachers, oftentimes being egged on by people who say that teachers' unions are the problem. But really the problem is that we don't have, because of our leadership failure, the funding to open schools,
right,
to deal with the current crisis.
No, but just to be really clear, I mean, I'm not blaming the teachers for any of this. I'm blaming,
Right.
billionaire Betsy, and I'm blaming the superintendents and the people who didn't take those months over the summers to prepare our schools to be able to do the things that we need, and also our legislatures for not funding what needs to be done. So I just want to make that clear that my statement may have been a little broad, but when I say the schools, I mean the people who are running them.
Right, and also our lawmakers in state legislatures and in the federal government who haven't come up with the funding to reopen schools safely. We have teachers right now, for instance, who are having to pay for their personal protection equipment, things like face masks and sanitizing equipment. They have to pay that out of their own pockets. They're even paying it for their own students. And that's because of a failure, for instance, Congress not coming up with the money to give schools what they need to deal with the current crisis. We have a situation in many schools, particularly in urban neighborhoods, where they're told, well, they have to reinforce safe distancing between the students, but the classrooms are very small. They're told, well, you have to have a safe place for the students to convene and learn. And in the meantime, their ventilation systems are woefully out of date and inadequate to deal with a pandemic.
Right, but
So,
that isn't something
yeah.
that isn't something new. I mean, this is stuff that's been systemic for decades.
Right. We have schools in the U.S. that are still underfunded for decades. We have schools in most states that are getting less money now than they did in 2008. That's from a study by the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. So, no, none of this is new, but during a crisis situation, it just is accentuated. Also, what's accentuated is the issue of schools in neighborhoods of lower income Black and brown students being particularly in need of more funding. This is a chronic problem. We've known this for years, but it just gets exacerbated in a situation like what we have now.
Right, and the reason I started this segment, I mean, it's the reason I started this segment off with the charter school chain that is, has been fined $4.5 million for the shenanigans that they've pulled. We see this across the charter industries, and again, it falls heavily on those communities that can least afford it. But it seems like every time we have a silver bullet idea, we try it out like on the folks who can least afford to not get a good education.
Well, it's interesting that while Betsy DeVos and other people who are prone to want to privatize schools tout what charter schools are able to do to be flexible in this current crisis, it's interesting that the largest charter school chain in New York City, which is called Success Academy, is not opening for in-person instruction at a time where the public schools in New York City are desperately trying to reopen with a hybrid program that allows schools to have children in the building for at least some time during the instructional period. So the idea that, if we privatize charter schools, if we privatize public education through things like charter schools, private schools, we could somehow resolve this crisis. It's just not. It's just a fabrication. It's just a myth.
Right. So, what's the way forward? I mean, I was reading your article, and then one of the people you quoted said, half the superintendents in the country should be fired because they've fallen down on the job. What's the answer going forward? Because we're in this moment where schools are going to start shutting down again really soon. I mean, New York's clawing back some of their restrictions, closing things down early. My local schools, they've closed down for a couple of days. There's a bunch of stuff happening that we're clearly not prepared for. Is there an answer?
I know. Well, that's a very difficult question, and the schools are being overwhelmed by the problem with community spread. Philadelphia Public Schools have shelved plans to resume in-person classes. They said they would. They've just reneged on that. Cincinnati schools returned to online after just a short time where they were trying to do in-person learning. Topeka, Kansas abandoned plans to bring middle and high school students back to classrooms. Anchorage, Alaska delayed a plan to bring students back to classrooms. In California, you've got San Diego and Sacramento pausing plans to reopen schools. Los Angeles is not expected to bring the majority of students back to schools until 2021. Same with San Francisco. So it's just this rolling fiasco where you have a lack of government leadership dealing with the fundamental problems of a pandemic, which are that you have community spread and community spread that is out of control, and at the same time you have people who say, well, I need to send my kids to school because I got to go to work,
right? And
also because I care about my kid's future. I care about whether my kid is getting adequately educated. But until we deal with this issue of this spike in widespread infections, you can't depend upon schools to resolve that. It's got to be a bigger community effort to control the pandemic.
Yeah, but what do you do when half the community's crazy? I mean, we're in this weird world where I think half the people think it's a hoax and just made up by Democrats to win elections or steal elections. I mean, we're just in this moment, Jeff, where I'm looking at the education system and I'm going, has it been a failure for the last 50 years? Because we've got all of these people who seem to know so much who actually don't know anything and can't process information or evaluate sources. It just seems like we're in such a weird spot that our education has failed us, not just right now, but for the last 50 years.
I don't know what changes people's minds, Rick, and I think it does really vary from person to person or community to community. But I think that at some point, people have got to see like when you have these communities out in what people call red states, the Midwest and the Plains states and the Deep South, when they see that their own neighbors and their family members are being infected because of a failure to deal with a systemic problem, a problem that is one of public health, not individual choice.
Right.
You've just got to believe that at some point that reality would change their minds, and they would see that, wow, public schools have been the thing that we've taken for granted. It is the place where families have a safety net that we can rely on,
and it's where we've saddled all of our problems to be dealt with.
Right.
Between the schools and the police departments, we've let all of that stuff roll downhill, all of our societal problems onto their backs. So if the schools don't take care of it, the police departments do, and increasingly there are those who want to kind of meld the two together.
Right. And so they would see that somehow this public infrastructure that includes fire protection, roads and bridges, and yes, public schools, would somehow need to be lifted up as the way for us to resolve what has become this horrible crisis.
Right.
And that would require, of course, dealing with us being able to safely have this interaction in a public place.
So let me ask you, because outside of what I've advocated for years, which is smaller class sizes, increased pay for teachers, so that they don't, have to take on second jobs or third jobs to make ends meet. Outside of the things that we've talked about, more school nurses, more librarians, more more access to books and all of that stuff. Outside of that, is there anything we should be doing? I mean, I know we're not going to do those things, but I guess what I'm looking for is how do we turn this ship around, and in a way that's going to keep our kids safe, but also not let them lose 2 full years of education.
Well, I think what you have to do is reinforce the democratic process. What I see happening with a lot of the advocacy for reopening schools is people lifting up research point of views that come from primarily economists, that come from think tanks, that are always commenting and using statistical evaluations from a 30,000-foot level. What you have to do is, I think, is to lift up the voices of teachers in local communities. Like, given the circumstances in the community, for instance, what is the R naught spread? What is the positive rate from testing in the community? What is going on with the health care situation? Is there an infrastructure for testing and contact tracing? Those, the people who have a sense of that, who tend to be the teachers, the local public health advocates, those people are the ones who we should be listening to. And that requires a democratic process, rather than a top-down mandate coming from, Betsy DeVos and Donald Trump, who have just, been in favor of reopen the schools, regardless of the situation. Or you've got a lot of Republican governors that are also in that vein. We have to go back to our community values and our sense of democracy to steer a safer way forward.
Yeah. So, but what do you say to the people who go, Jeff, we've got to get kids back to school because it's much more harmful for them to be at home. And there's an argument there, that they're home alone, they're isolated, everything's on the screen. That it's worth the risk of sending them to school and potentially infecting them and the rest of the family. What do you say to that argument?
I think that's a very difficult argument to wade into, and it varies, like I said, from community to community. But there's certainly some validity to the point that students need to be in class for in-person instruction. There's a lot of research that shows that online learning is just not very good. As a matter of fact, it might even be at times detrimental. But however, that's not an argument to suggest that we should not do online learning better. Given the certain circumstances, we should be putting our resources into making online learning the best it can be, and that really means maintaining relationships between the students and the teachers. Right now, we don't have a lot of, at least what I'm seeing from district to district, a lot of support for teachers to get what they need to maintain their relationships with students in a remote or online situation.
Right.
For instance, most research shows that class sizes in an online situation ought to be smaller. But what we see is the opposite. We see teachers having to deal with 50, 60 students. We also know that in an online situation, the school day needs to vary. You can't have students sitting in front of a computer for 6 or 7 hours during the day. That's just not healthy. We also see that teachers are not getting the professional development they need to be more successful at online learning. For instance, the ability to use new technologies. Teachers need that support. They need to be trained in how to do that.
Because they obviously weren't trained going through college and through their early career. Because who could have foreseen that we would screw up this pandemic so badly that we'd be shutting schools down for 2 years?
Exactly. And you've got teachers that have been in the profession for 20, 30 years who never foresaw this kind of situation.
Yeah. Any hope? I guess the last line of questioning. Any hope that we move in this direction? And if there's not, how do we make sure that we get some?
Well, okay, we've had an election. We have a new president. Our new president has committed himself to significantly increasing federal funding for public schools. And that means funding for this particular crisis, and also significantly increasing the funding that's needed for schools that serve the most struggling communities. And he's going to have a challenge to get that agenda through this Congress. And it looks like, well, it's not a done deal yet because we've still got the Senate runoffs in Georgia. But there's a strong chance it's going to be a Republican Congress. Let's hope there's going to be a groundswell of public opinion that'll move our government to take on something that most people in most communities think is fundamental for government to do, which is to educate our kids. And that means having more funding for this crisis and for dealing with the technology situation, the viral situation, and the needs that teachers have to do what's best for our kids.
So Joe Biden's got his work cut out for him, and it'll be interesting to see who he chooses for Secretary of Education. I think that'll give us a little bit of an indication of where things may go. But Jeff, I appreciate you taking a little time for us. Hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
Sure, Rick. Thanks again for having me on.
Good stuff. The article, Bad Leadership is Plunging Public Schools into a Crisis, written by Jeff Bryant over at The Progressive. Jeff is a chief correspondent with the Independent Media Institute. You can check out their website, independentmediainstitute.org. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2009. That was the day more than 5,000 Philadelphia transit workers walked off the job. For 6 days, buses, subways, and trolleys that carried close to 500,000 commuters a day came to a screeching halt. The strike defied then-Governor Ed Rendell's orders for both sides to stay at the bargaining table. The union planned to strike during the World Series, but pushed back the strike date under threat of serious consequences made by the governor. For months, the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, or SEPTA, stalled contract talks. The authority hoped to rip up workers' abilities to choose work assignments based on seniority rights. They also looked to eliminate jobs through speed up. The union was determined to hang tough despite a steady barrage of anti-union commentary in the media. Local editorials smeared workers as ingrates and whined that they weren't sufficiently thankful to simply have a job in such hard economic times. More cynical writers contended that sticking points on healthcare were resolved when SEPTA agreed to cover the cost of Viagra. Authorities, including Philadelphia Mayor Michael Nutter, claimed the union was being unreasonable in the face of such generous terms offered by transit management. But TWU Local 234 successfully defeated the boss's offense to wrestle away benefits and work rule concessions. The union demanded wage increases and limits to employee health care contributions. Irate union members insisted on independent audits to reveal where years of pension money went. They accused SEPTA of raiding the already underfinanced pension fund. The union eventually conceded on pension contributions, but the strike was a victory. TWU members showed that even in difficult times, a successful fight could be waged against cutbacks and hard-won rights.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it's going to be interesting to see what the cabinet looks like as Joe Biden has named his vice presidential chief of staff as his future chief of staff when in the White House, Ron Klain. Going to be interesting to see how things play out. There are a couple of spots that I find, for me, most important, Department of Labor being the most important one. And, there's some talk of Bernie Sanders actually wanting the gig. And I think Sanders would be an incredible Secretary of Labor. And to be honest, and I don't use the word deserve very often, but this is a guy who deserves that spot. After all he's done to push the idea that work should matter, this is where he belongs. And I would say at the right time. Somebody who's going to move the agency back towards where it was supposed to be, promoting the idea of people joining and forming unions, promoting the idea of actually engaging in collective bargaining at the workplace. It's the moment I think that someone like Sanders is really necessary. Now we'll see. There are folks who are on the left saying, yeah, we absolutely want him. Folks on the right saying, oh no, he's a socialist. Oh my goodness. I think for working people, he'd be the best person there. Taking us back to the original idea of the NLRA that encouraged our government to have people to join and form unions because they understood that was the best way to get a fair shake. And I've been having these conversations a lot lately. When talking about how, over the last 30 plus years, we've seen wages stagnant. We've seen healthcare costs just skyrocket. And, the amount that workers are expected to foot the bill for it just keeps rising and rising and rising. And I keep coming back to this moment where I think about when I entered the workforce, where the 8-hour day was sacrosanct. You got overtime after 8 hours. That was what was expected. Or you just didn't work overtime. That health care was part of your compensation package. It wasn't something that they gouged you for. And yet we're in this moment. And I guess, this is where the employer class has done a really incredible job. They've convinced us that it's our responsibility to help them fund our health care. When, it's part of what our compensation is. And I look at story after story where, these contract negotiations go on in places where folks are lucky enough to have unions. And the sticking point is always healthcare costs. And it brings me back to this moment where I'm just going, at some point, do we not as a country go, it's time. It's time to get rid of employer-based care and move to a system of portability. I don't care how you get there. I'm someone who believes the unions should be doing health insurance to where it doesn't matter where you go. And the future of employment in this country is going to change radically. So the idea that we would have portability through our unions, much like the building trades does, no matter which contractor you worked for, you get the same wages, same benefits, same health care, same pension, same everything, and it transfers with you place to place. That's the future for the gig economy. I don't see us getting away from the gig economy anytime soon. This is where we start talking about sectorial bargaining. They start talking about how we make sure that there's a floor under people's feet. And then to create a society of people who respect other people's labor. I mean, we're in this moment where, they've trained us. Again, hooray for me and the hell with everybody else. And the question is what's it going to take to rein us back? Because we're just reliving the same history. We're reliving the history of, my great-grandparents. And we're going to have to relive the history of my grandparents who had to fight to undo all the damage that we're setting up. We are heading back to the Lochner era. We are heading back to the era of you're desperate enough and hungry enough to work for poverty wages in desperate conditions. That is your liberty or your freedom. We're heading right back there. And it's not a good place. Not a good place at all. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney is going to be here to share some thoughts on the top news of the day. Stick around.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
They've given us a mandate for action on COVID, the economy, climate change.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris win the pivotal 2020 presidential election, claim mandate for climate action.
McConnell's already lining up his troops to be ready to make things difficult for the Biden administration.
But they'll face huge hurdles in a Republican Senate. Tropical storm Eta deluges Florida as Theta brews in the Atlantic, plus China to phase out gasoline cars by 2035.
Really?
Yes, really.
Cool. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
We have serious problems to deal with, from COVID to the economy to racial justice and climate change. We don't have any more time to waste on partisan warfare.
Really? Then what am I supposed to use for snarky comment, Joe? You ever think of anyone but yourself? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I know you've got nothing but good news for us today because Joe Biden is the apparent winner of the 2020 election.
Yes, and he defeated Donald Trump even while running on an aggressive agenda for confronting climate change. Imagine that. But first, Tropical Storm Eta made landfall in the Florida Keys on Sunday, knocking out power and flooding much of South Florida as it moves north. Eta dumped nearly 2 feet of rain in some areas onto already saturated ground, and Miami residents discovered that one of the city's expensive new flood drainage pumps failed again. As we go to air, subtropical storm Theta has formed in the Atlantic. It is the 29th storm of the historic 2020 Atlantic hurricane season, breaking the record set back in 2005.
The all-time record, I guess.
Yes.
And we are so far past the English-named storms, we are already into, I don't even know where Theta falls in the Greek alphabet.
Neither do I. On to our main story. Good news for climate hawks and for all life on the planet. Former Vice President Joe Biden has been projected the winner of the 2020 presidential election, and his victory signals a 180-degree turn for the U.S. on climate action. On Saturday, in his first public remarks as president-elect, Biden put climate change front and center.
What is our mandate? I believe it's this. Americans have called upon us to marshal the forces of decency, the forces of fairness, to marshal the forces of science and the forces of hope in the great battles of our time. In the battle to save our planet by getting climate under control.
Biden's win was supported by big majorities, and he received more votes than any other candidate in U.S. history. In remarks on Friday, before results from key battleground states, Biden called the huge turnout a clear mandate from voters to enact his agenda. Young voters under 30 played a critical role, according to an analysis by Tufts University, increasing their turnout over the 2016 election and favoring Biden by more than 25 points over Trump. And climate was clearly on the ballot. Exit polls by Fox News and the Associated Press found 70% of all voters, not just those who cast ballots for Biden, supported, quote, increasing government spending on green and renewable energy.
Wow, good for us for a change.
Once sworn in January, Biden says he will immediately sign executive orders to overturn as much of Trump's rollbacks of pollution and climate regulations as possible. And he says when he rejoins the United Nations Paris Climate Agreement, he will strive to persuade other nations to adopt higher, more ambitious emissions targets as well. Scientists are urging Biden to rebuild the nation's science and research sector and repair public trust in science and the credibility of federal science agencies. However, Biden's agenda faces major hurdles from Republicans in the U.S. Senate. Over the weekend, current Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said that he will control Biden's selection of cabinet officers and key federal agency heads through the Senate confirmation process.
McConnell's already lining up his troops to be ready to make things difficult for the Biden administration, looking to control the type of cabinet that Biden can assemble, the type of hearings that he can have.
Control of the U.S. Senate chamber will be decided by 2 runoff elections in Georgia on January 5th. Finally, more good news. China has announced it will phase out conventional gasoline vehicles. By 2035, half of all new vehicles sold in China must be electric, plug-in hybrid, or powered by fuel cell. The other half must be hybrids, meaning within 15 years, no new gas or diesel vehicles will be sold in China. And that will have a massive effect on the global car industry.
It will indeed, including on U.S.-made cars sold in China.
Oh, yeah.
For much more on all of these fascinating stories and others we couldn't get to, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
All right, the crazy is out again. One of my favorite stories of the day. A guy from Jefferson City, Utah, was caught speeding 130 miles an hour in the snow. Clearly was not concerned for his own personal safety. Doing 130 miles an hour, he was going to drive to Missouri because he wanted to kill Claire McCaskill, the former U.S. senator. Former. He's not even a senator anymore. He just got in his head, I'm going to go kill Claire McCaskill today. And then going to do 130 miles an hour on the snow, on the slick snow to do that. Also, more fun, there was another man arrested for threatening to kill Chuck Schumer. So I guess it's open season on lunatics wanting to go after our elected and former elected leaders. I think this is the Trump effect having an effect. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, well, the crazy and all else. I've asked our good friend Bob Ney to come talk with us. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
I'm a little distraught. To be honest, I'm looking at these stories. I'm getting, I've stepped into this rabbit hole of the truckers strike. Stop the tires. The people who are, I don't think they can quite explain to me if it's they're angry that Trump lost, or if it's that they're angry that they believe that was stolen, or that they're angry that the Green New Deal might actually be considered, or that they're angry that, I don't know, just angry. It just seems like we're in this moment of everyone's really ticked off, and the people with guns seem to be the ones who are the angriest.
I mean, well, to be candid about it, I mean, there's goofballs everywhere for every reason, and it's just grown, and it's just part of American life, and it's out there.
That's the reason I brought this up, because you're usually the voice of calm and reason. You're one of the people I look to for some bit of sanity. Has it always been this way? Have we had this level of kookery in the past, and maybe just didn't know it was going on? Maybe we kept it quiet because we didn't want to encourage more of it. Thoughts?
No, I think it's increased. When I was in office, we had a guy that showed up at our office. He had a trunk full of guns. We had to push the emergency buttons and have him come up. And eventually got beyond us, got arrested and did 14 years for other things. I mean, if I look at my 24 years, right, in there, I can name you, maybe 3 incidents. I think today's world's different. And the other thing, I'll tell you this too, I noticed this when I was in my final years in office, where people would call and say, if you don't do this, I'm going to vote you out. Now, I would immediately say, vote me out. That was my standard line. Vote me out. When I have a conversation with me, fine. I could care less if you vote for me or not, But it was beginning to increase. I could see a difference from 1981 to 2006. I could just see it growing. Now, I'm not elected anymore, but looking from the outside, it's just ever increasing of anger, just period. It's out there, it's around. People are angry over everything. And then I call it opinion anger. You disagree with somebody, wow. It's like you're coming from another planet for disagreeing. So I think it's way on the increase.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
The question is why? I argue part of it is, we're all super stressed. We're all worried about how we're going to put food on the table, keep a roof over their head. Because, look, wages have been stagnant and declining for years. Healthcare costs are skyrocketing. And, the life that we were promised, work hard, play by the rules, get ahead, hasn't really turned out for most people.
I think there's several things. What you mentioned is a big part of it. It's been ever increasing, to be on that treadmill. You wake up in the morning and you're having breakfast and you're wondering, you and your spouse, a significant other, are wondering how you're going to end the day, how you're going to make it, how you're going to feed the kids, how you're going to do this, how you're going to do that. Because even with a, quote, good economy, as you know, there's underfunding of wages where you make $12, $15 an hour and there's 2 of you working, good luck, on fighting the cost of gasoline and increases and rent. I mean, it's just ever increasing. So I think that stress level is a big, big, big factor. The other thing I also blame, because I'm old, I'm old. Technology, this instant, you can send things out and they're doing this and be angry, and people are much more brazen saying things to each other when they're not face to face.
Yeah.
Where your fist could go up in the air. Pretty brave, when you're on Facebook and you can say what you want, you can offend them. I seriously think technology and the use of it, the instant. When I was in politics, in fact, my daughter was talking about this just about 3 hours ago, Rick. Facebook was just coming into being, right? And, you didn't have that instant check and instant anger, and it could be spread on social media. People had a little bit of time to, think about what they wanted to do, or they made a phone call. I blame that as part of it, too.
Yeah. But here's the thing.
A fake world.
Yeah, I mean, I come back to the whole conservative ideology of the free market being able to solve all of our problems. Clearly, the free market of ideas has caused us great division, because we're not using this platform to check each other for being right, or fact check or doing that. We're checking it for people who believe and think as crazy as we do at the lowest levels. So I'm again, I've not been a free market laissez-faire person ever, because it is a race to the bottom. So it's not surprising to me that we have a race to the bottom in political dialogue when we leave it up to the free market.
Well, that's very true. I mean, the best example, if you want to talk about personal stress for people, the best example is healthcare. If you leave we did. When healthcare was left up to the free market, look what happened to us. Oh, you've got a genetic code problem. We're not going to insure you. Well, we'll insure you for $1,700 a month. Oh, you've got a bad heart. Sorry, no room for you at the end unless you want to pay $1,000 a month at that time. That was the free market. And when the free market sat, a lot of people went from not making a lot of money but never worrying about health care. Like when I was a kid, my dad didn't worry, didn't make much money, we didn't worry. Then they went to, oh my goodness, if you get sick and we don't have enough money, what happens? If we have a little bit of money left to pay on our house, we're going to lose it. We went into that huge stress where people also used the emergency room as a doctor. You know that. They did that. I think that is a huge stress. But that's a perfect example where the Republicans said the free market will work. Well, guess what? It didn't. It did not work. That is a huge personal stress level. If you've got kids and you can't give them health care, wow. Just think how that was.
No, I know. I've been there once.
Yeah,
And I feel for people who are chronically in that position. But again, you come back to this kind of anger. Can we use it in a constructive way? And I'm trying to figure out how to harness this, because when you sit down and you actually talk to people, no matter who they voted for, no matter what their ideology is, I still come back to the common belief that we all somewhat want to be in the same ballpark. And I'm trying to figure out how you harness that to move forward to get to that ballpark. We may not all be standing on home plate together, but we'll be somewhere in the arena.
Well, it's true. I used to talk with a lot of white-collar workers, right? And this was really something, because if you talk to the corporation, it was union versus non-union, right? If you talk to a lot of the white-collar workers who were not unionized and for whatever reason couldn't be unionized, right? They had stress levels. They didn't like what the corporate genius was doing above them,
Yep.
They were angry. I used to tell people, just because they're white-collar workers, non-union, doesn't mean they're not angry. They are. A lot of them are. They can't do anything about it. There's no union capability right now for a lot of them. So, when you look at that, I mean, you have to stop and think about, people's stress levels and their anger. Now, if you can channel that all together, for rights, for your workplace rights, channel all that thinking, whether you're union or not union. If you're unhappy, try to channel it. So maybe there's ways they could do it, and the best way to do it is to write letters, have a common goal, and believe me, letter writing to political people scares their staff. Hey, we have 653 letters. What are you going to do? So maybe it can be channeled that way on issues.
No, I'm hoping because I just saw a video that didn't go viral of election officials illegally collecting ballots from a drop box that no one considered a bad thing. It obviously did not go viral, but the one that someone said, "Oh, there's something here," millions of views, and there was still nothing there.
Well, yes, and it still is a fact. If there was something illegal done, does it affect the outcome? And yeah, December the 14th, if this goes beyond there for no reason, and there's a legal stalemate put together that's, a weird way they're going to try to do this into the court system, then that's a real problem. We're going to have examples. They're going to be out there. That doesn't mean it's the norm. They got the guy, I think it's in Pennsylvania, in your state, that he said something, then he recanted it, but he didn't recant it, and they keep playing him over and over. I think he's from Pennsylvania.
He's from Erie. Richard Hooker is his name.
Right, and they keep, well, he didn't say that. Well, he did say that. Well, not this one guy. Let's say he did see something. He saw one thing.
Yep.
Did somebody that's dead in Ohio vote? Probably. Does it change the election? No. Should we find out who did it? Yes. Those are pretty simple, answers and easy questions. Doesn't mean we have to, go crazy over that one thing. We just need to find out.
No, in fact, you brought this up. There was a story over at Newsweek about this military wife who found her name on one of the Republican lists of people who they suspected for voter fraud. And she evidently had lived in I guess, near Las Vegas. And they moved to California so her husband could be in the Air Force, and but they voted in Nevada because they had the mail-in ballot, and now they're going, this is someone who fraudulently voted because they moved. And you go, what do you do with military personnel?
Right, it's always been a problem.
Right, and it's not like they voted in Nevada and California. That, I think everybody would agree, that is a criminal act. They didn't. Right. They voted in one place, one person, one vote. I don't see a problem with it.
Right, and that's why you also have, and we were criticized heavily for this, believe me, with conspiracy theories, but that's why you also have provisional ballots. Yeah. They can be looked at. They delay an election. Let's put that out there. Provisional ballots can delay an election if it's not lopsided in the counting. And then you look, did they vote in two states, or were they military? Okay, we'll count that. Wait a minute, there was an error. That's not right. We'll shred it. And that's how it runs. Right. But it means you delay, in the counting, and that's why there's a recount in Georgia. Fine, it's within the proximity of the vote. If they want one in Wisconsin, they got to pay for it because it's not within the grounds.
Right.
These are pretty set rules that we have had before Donald Trump.
But we never had anyone like this who, to be honest, I don't think any result he would accept. And I think his followers wouldn't accept anything either. And I said earlier, I go, this is the result of, all these years of participation awards. These are people who clearly don't believe that they can lose. But yet, as I've said, my mother would have caught, me acting like this after, something. I'd have gotten smacked like you wouldn't believe.
Well, here's the thing. It's up to December the 14th when the electors speak. Up to that point, and again, this isn't Broward County with 537 votes that decides the presidency. Right. It's not. But up to that point, people can say all kinds of things. The lawyers for both sides can say they're crazy, and the lawyers on the other side can say it's fraud. But here's the point. The head honcho himself, the president, he can go ahead and file legal motions. That can happen. But you don't need to stand there and say it's all fraud. I was cheated. He doesn't know technically. He has to file motions. That's disturbing.
No, and that's the great thing. As I started today's show off with, one of the things I love about lawyers is they'll look you in the eye and they'll lie to you like crazy, and they'll twist things. But as soon as they get into that courtroom with the person with the robe on and they're under oath, they generally tell the truth.
right? And let's take the perfect example of this. How many people out there listening right now to your show maybe still think that there were not Trump monitors and available at the recounts? They, quote, weren't allowed in, remember?
Yep.
Well, what listeners that believe that probably don't realize is that went to court, and it simply wasn't true. So the court said, no, we're going to throw that one out. It's not true. They have them on tape.
Yep.
Every single place there was a D, there was an R. It's all on film. But what do you hear? It's going to be on the internet tonight. They were excluded from the count.
No, it's this victimization thing that's gone on. But my point is, you've got these lawyers who go in and they tell the truth. And, here in Pennsylvania yesterday, you had one of these lawyers in front of the judge, and the judge asked him point blank, are you saying there's fraud here? And he said, well, no, I'm not talking fraud. It's a big thing to call somebody a liar, and we're not doing that. Tap dancing how they can, but ultimately saying, no, there's nothing here.
Right.
It's crazy.
And of course, it's the law where you take little things and you try to hope in the process they're made into big things. That's the way it works in a lot of cases. And of course, remember, they bill by the hour. Okay.
There is absolutely that. I have friends who are lawyers. They bill in 6 minutes. You get
Except
6 minutes.
Rudy bills by the minute.
Not by the word?
I'm just stunned. At one time he was such, honestly, a hero, and I'm just stunned where he ends up at.
Yeah, he most certainly has sold to somebody. And the whole thing with the the Four Seasons landscaping thing.
I watched that.
Who does that?
I watched it. I tried to give the benefit of the doubt. It doesn't exist.
No, there's no benefit of the doubt. And how does the guy who booked that not get fired?
Right. Yeah, it was bad. Yeah.
But I guess the reality is it's no worse than what we've seen in my view in the last 4 years. Because now you look at the state of Texas; they're the first state in the U.S. to surpass 1 million COVID cases. New York is starting to clamp back down. We're starting to see all the ramp up to clamping down, because we've had the most number of people in the hospital right now, and yet you wouldn't know it from the kind of response that I'm seeing coming out of this administration.
Well, the administration has gone on it now. It's gone. I mean, the task force is headed by Biden. I can't even recall a press statement from the, quote, COVID group or anything I've seen in the news from the Trump administration. I mean, this is about, lawsuits and things at this point. Look, let's face it, there is nothing.
And that's
Biden has the COVID sort of task force that he's put together.
And they actually have doctors on it, so we might actually have a chance. But, Bob, I appreciate the time, man. Always great talking with you, my friend.
Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend, Bob Ney. Look, the reality is, and this is where I love the fact that Joe Biden is now president-elect, and now we may actually have people who are, actually somewhat in line with how we deal with this. Maybe actually read the playbook on how you crush some of this stuff. Because we're going backwards. I mean, the fact Texas, over 1 million people have it or have had it. That's just mind blowing. And as I said, New York's moving back. They're shutting down on-premise services at 10 p.m. every night, capping the number of people who can attend private parties at 10. They're going back because the numbers are spiking. And this is the time. Seriously, this is the time when everybody was saying was the most dangerous, the most deadly. And yet we've got leadership that is nowhere to be found. In fact, Donald Trump made his first appearance in several days today, and late, by the way, to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, with it being Veterans Day. And then back to the golf course. Now, I find it interesting that Michael Cohen is saying, you won't see Donald. He's going to go away to Christmas, and he won't be back until ever. And you know what? I'm actually okay with that. I was actually okay with that on Inauguration Day 2017. But that's a whole nother thing for a whole nother time. I am looking forward to January 20th like I have never looked forward before. The sooner that we have this transition, the sooner we begin to heal and move forward, the sooner we get to solve real problems and get real things done, the better off we're all going to be. I think it's that simple. And my fear is, as Joe Walsh said earlier, immediately Donald Trump's going to announce he's running for president, and for the next 4 years, we're going to hear nothing but Trump. So is it possible to turn the Trump off? And will our media structure finally tire of him? I sure hope so. But we'll see what happens. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So much more in the coming days. Tomorrow on the big program, our good friend Sarah Kendzior is going to be here to share some thoughts on the fascist states. Also, our good friend Sarah Burris is going to be here as well. Almost a Sarah day. We'll look forward to having you back here tomorrow. Thanks so much for tuning in.